Hello, everyone. Honneur, respect. Welcome to the 27th Annual African American, and Caribbean Studies Summer Institute, more specifically, the Haitian Language and Culture. I will be speaking on building on the linguistic strengths of Haitian students today. But first, my name is Dr. Edwidge Crevecoeur-Bryant. I'm an associate professor at Flagler College. I also am the ESOL coordinator at the college. I would like to also thank the organizers of this institute, because I know there's a lot of work that went into pulling all of this together. And I would like to thank you, everyone, but especially Ms. Nadia Charles, for her work in putting all of this together, and then for also inviting me to speak to you today. So again, Ms. Charles, I sincerely thank you. All right, so I am going to, as I mentioned a minute ago, I'm going to be speaking on building on the linguistic strengths of Haitian students. So before I continue, I just wanted to share with you very quickly my background, all right? So I'm taking you directly to Haiti in my background, because this was a picture taken in Piton, in part of Petit Goave, where it's very mountainous. And the people there, especially in Piton, I've been working with them for many years, are involved in a replanting of the area, because we're experiencing in Haiti a deforestation issue problem. So they've worked very, very, very hard to begin to plant more, trees and just a number and flowers and so forth. So I thought I would take you to Piton with me, as you see in the background. All right, so let's begin with our presentation. And that is, I've again take you to Haiti. For those of you who are not familiar with Haiti and the map of Haiti, this is why I included it, so that it could put in context. And when I'm going to be speaking about the strengths of Haitian students, this is also going to be part of why is it, what is involved in talking about the strengths, not only the strengths that Haitian students bring, but also as teachers, how can you strengthen their own perception of themselves, right, as Haitian students. So one of the things that you can do, as you can see here, is once a student tells you that he or she or they are from Haiti, the first thing that you should do is, the next thing is to ask them, what parts of Haiti are you from exactly? And then that way a student can tell you, oh, I'm from Gonaïve, or I'm from Saint-Marc, or I'm from Port-au-Prince, or I'm from Tigua, which is right here. And this is where, as I said, that I work closely with the community here in Tigua, the community of Piton. And here is Port-au-Prince. Oftentimes what I find is that schools just, or in developing programs, who throw as soon as a student will say, I'm Haitian, all Haitians are just, the students are put together with other Haitian students and so forth, without finding out what parts of Haiti are they from, because the assumption is that all Haitian students and all Haitians, everyone's homogeneous. So there's really no reason as to find out exactly where these students are from, which is absolutely incorrect, simply because we have, depending on what parts of Haiti you come from, you will have a different experience. Since we're talking about education, you can have a totally different educational experience if you come from the city versus if you come from a particularly rural area. So again, as teachers, please make sure that is in this empowering effort that we're going to be talking about today, that you also, take it upon yourself to find out exactly where your Haitian students are from in Haiti. Okay? So our starting point will be, again, since we are focusing on strengths, our starting point must be a pedagogy that normalizes bilingualism and positions bilinguals as people with strengths. And this is a quote, as you can see, that I obtained from Espinosa and Sensi Moreno, with their perception of and definition from their outstanding book, Rooted in Strength, using translanguaging to grow multilingual readers and writers, using translanguaging to grow multilingual readers and writers, as I just mentioned. And so in looking for an outstanding definition of bilingualism, I came across this quote directly from them, which speaks exactly to what I'm going to be speaking about today. And what they're saying is that we have to begin by normalizing bilingualism. This first part, that in itself is revolutionary, if you will, in thinking about bilingualism in the United States. So where it's not perceived, it has not been normalized. So in other words, eventually we will need to be at a point where to be bilingual should be perceived as one of the things that makes us who we are. That is the case throughout the world, that people are bilingual and people are multilingual. So why is it here that it's not perceived as the norm? Okay? And what they're saying that it has to, part of our goal must be that it becomes very normal that all children are bilingual. So until then, what they're also saying is that bilingualism and it positions bilinguals as people with strengths. And this will be the core of my presentation to you today. To what extent, when we have our students in our classrooms, do we see them, the fact that our emergent bilinguals, do we see them as students, young people, as possessing a strength? And the strength is in their ability to speak more than one language. Okay? So again, I would like for you to really think about this, that do we, even as bilingual teachers, even as if we're in a dual language program, our goal is to really and truly to be able to see all of our students as possessing strength in their linguistic repertoire, if you will, because the language is a resource. And here the students are coming to us with this valuable resource that we should celebrate, the fact that they are able to speak more than one language. But instead, because of the fact that we're not celebrating it and that we're not actually seeing it as a strength, you have students who can't wait to stop speaking their native language. We have students who are ashamed to say that they speak their native language. They are so ready to, and they want to be able to speak English because of the fact that they no longer want to speak their native language. They are getting this message from the larger society. And for some, they're getting this message in our classroom. Right? And again, this is about being able to shift our perceptions of our students in our classrooms and really and truly celebrate their bilingualism. Okay? So why strengths? And these are some of my beautiful children in Haiti sharing their artwork. Because again, they're coming in with so much talent and just incredibly prideful of what they can do. So why strengths? Why do we talk about strengths? What is the importance of that? Because again, if we perceive these children as having talent and strength and just so much to share, that we're going to be willing to build on that and to capitalize on what they're coming with, rather than seeing it from a deficit perspective. Okay? So what do we know about Haitian students? And what do I encourage you to find out about your students? Okay? Our Haitian students are a homogeneous group. I've addressed that, but find out more about it. How do we perceive Haitian students in our classes? Okay? How do we perceive them? Do Haitian students feel empowered or devalued in our classes? Do they feel invisible in our classes? Okay? Do we tap into their funds of knowledge? What is it that they're coming in with? Okay? What do we know about Haitian history? Haitian history is so incredibly rich, but often it's not. We know that it's left out of the history books, all of the major contributions that Haitians have done to these United States. Okay? As for example, fighting in the American Revolution. Okay? Oftentimes that's not discussed. Okay? Where you've had Haitians who actually participated, 500 Haitians, as a matter of fact, over 500, who came to fight on behalf of Americans to fight against the British. Okay? So in the war, especially in Savannah. Okay? But often that's not discussed. So what do we know about Haitian history that will empower the students? Okay? What are the languages, especially Haitian Creole, valued in US school? What are the languages that Haitian students speak that are valued in US schools? Do we know about the other languages? Because there are some students who are Haitian students, absolutely monolingual, Haitian Creole speakers when they first arrive here. And there are other Haitian students who are bilingual in the sense that they do speak, Haitian Creole is our native language. We all speak Haitian Creole, but you have some Haitian students who also speak French. And you also have Haitian students who also speak Spanish. Okay? But do we ask these questions to our Haitian students to find out more about who they are and what are the strengths? Okay? Should languages be valued? Absolutely, because we will see that languages play a significant role in the process of inquiry in schools. So we will see that. Okay. We also say, and I will give you some additional examples, that right now we should be engaged in what is known as transformative education. And transformative education is defined, we say that transformative education develops curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. It allows us to question, analyze, and feel empowered to find solutions to existing problems. All right, all of this, think about it, how difficult it is to be able to participate or in any type of activity where you cannot use the language in which you are able to think critically, for example, in the language that you are not able to question or to analyze. Therefore, you don't feel as empowered to find solutions to existing problems. Okay? And we know this happens in certain schools where the focus is on transformative education. From day one, the students begin to engage in transformative education where their curiosity is celebrated. Are we celebrating the curiosity and the creativity of our Haitian children in the classroom? Are we doing that? And let me give you a very, very quick example. I taught at an institution in New York a long time ago, where the focus was indeed on transformative education. As I said, it was some time ago. And I taught at the graduate school, but the entire institution, there was just one building composed of the children's school as well as the graduate school. So every day I was able to see the children and see what they were engaged, what they were doing. And I saw them in the elevators and heard their conversations and so forth. One day, a group of students, and they also walked around with clipboards. And one day, a group came to my office and said, "Oh, Dr. Bryant, is it okay if we look through your trash?" And your trash can? I said, "Sure, of course." I didn't even think of anything of it. So they took it, dumped it out, and then came back. And then they were talking, but I was busy and I wasn't paying attention. When they were finished, they put everything in the trash, and then they thanked me, and then they left. As I said, I never thought anything of it until 2 weeks later, when I walked in the building, and there was a huge sign, huge banner that stated, "The way in which faculty members are destroying the planet." Mind you, these were fifth graders. They were fifth graders. And what they were doing was conducting a study to determine what was in our trash can to say how we were destroying the planet. And this was before we started recycling. Oh, you better believe 2 weeks after that, there were recycling bins all over the college because of the study that these fifth graders did. And they actually saw real results from what they worked on. And this was all the time. Well, I also should tell you that this institution, especially for the children's school, many of the children who attended there were very, very wealthy. They were children of movie stars. They were children. So when I would walk out the building, they would oftentimes limousines, Jaguars, and just all types of cars there to pick up the children. So if we know that transformative education develops curiosity and creativity and critical thinking, why isn't this type of learning taking place in all schools? Okay? And at the heart of it, as I just mentioned, is the ability to use the language that is available to you. Oftentimes, bilingual children are quiet, especially, and we have accepted the silent period. Well, the silent period really does exist because of the fact that they are not yet able to communicate in the second language that they are acquiring, but they are still coming in with language. And why aren't they using their native language during that silent period? Is it because that we're not welcoming them to use that language, the language that they have? So it's best to be silent until I'm able to speak the second language. What is the message behind that? My language is not valuable enough for me to speak it right now. And I'm not being encouraged. Why? Because no one understands. No, they even if no one really understands, no one else speaks the language, but it's okay. If we give them the opportunity to use the language, they will use it. And they will know others don't understand, but we're still validating what they're bringing in. Okay? Another school I visited in London many years ago, where there were students from all over the world. It looked like a mini UN. And the children were speaking their native language throughout the day. The teachers obtained no training whatsoever in second language acquisition. I said, what are the credentials that teachers need to have? They said, no, we allow the students to use the native language in the classroom. And they developed these beautiful word walls in many different languages. Okay? So if we are about transformative education, we first have to value the students who we see in front of us, as well as to value the language that they speak from day one. Okay, so what we have here, this is actually also taken directly from Haiti in Piton. And as you see here, I call him Mr. Samuel, who's taking inventory of the land to determine what will be able to grow there, how this will be done, and he's taking notes, and which is the really, again, the way that it should be if we are really talking about being transformative, because being transformative is empowering, and we will see that. Okay? So transformative education. So what is the connection actually between transformative education and power and privilege? That I would like for you to think about. Is there a connection between transformative education and power and privilege, especially given the example that I just provided to you a few minutes ago, that those students at that institution, many were perceived to be privileged. And with that came the notion that these students will be making many changes in the world. And because of the fact that they will be, as one teacher told me, not at that school, but a similar school where the teacher explained to me, they will be taking over the positions of their parents someday. So not only do they walk around with clipboards as well, not only that, but they also sit in classes boardroom style, because one day they will be the chairperson of the board. So therefore, they must begin very early to engage in making decisions and thinking about their world. Do you see? So I ask you the question again, what is the connection between transformative education and power and privilege? Oh, I need to go back here, first of all, because this is, again, the picture that you're currently seeing right here is still, again, Haiti, where this is the side of the mountain. And you see my Haitian, brothers and sisters right here. There are two women here planting on the side of the mountain in order to combat the deforestation issue. And I use this slide here to show, in terms of transformative feeling, that power, that you can actually change the world. You can make a difference. And here they're working incredibly hard to make that happen. Okay. So next, I just wanted to, along those lines also, to share with you two statements from Paulo Freire. And why is it that we need to make sure that we need to be sure to allow our students to engage in this transformative education, but that, again, that only can happen if we value who they are, to the point that they can feel as though they can ask questions in any language. Because Paulo Freire, in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he shares with us that what we do as human beings is that we search for human completion. And the human completion, when we feel complete, it rests in our discovery of freedom to name and to transform the world. So in other words, we become, when we feel complete, is when we have this sense that, you know what, I'm free. I am free to name, and I am free to transform the world. I can actually participate in events very early on, as I mentioned to you, with some of the students at that institution. Very, very early on, they're being told that they certainly may engage in activities to tell them that one day you will be able to name and to transform the world. At a very early age, they're given that message. Okay, so this constant concern of humanization, which he defines as humanization, leads us to clearly see out dehumanization. And this is what I would like for you to really think about. Once we realize that we are not included in being able to name and to transform our world, then we begin to see our dehumanization. We begin to feel as though we're less than, that we're not being able to participate in this very important process of naming the world, that only some are allowed to engage in this process. And this is what happens with many of our students in the classroom. Okay? And so I start with this to demonstrate the need for us to change our perceptions of our students in our classroom, and especially our Haitian students, in order for them to feel as though, yeah, I can name and transform my world as well, using the languages that I have. Okay? Because Paulo Freire also tells us that any situation in which some individuals are prevented from engaging in the process of inquiry is one of violence. Wow. It's one of violence when they're not engaged in the process of inquiry. This is how important it is, okay? Because then we feel as though children begin to feel angry, to feel dehumanized, when they are not allowed to engage in the process of inquiry. Because as humans, this is what we do. At a very early age, you can watch a child at 7, 8 months, and you see the wonder in their eyes. They look at anything, and it's their eyes, everything is filled with wonder because they want to know. They want to, very early on, begin to engage in the process of inquiry. And at some point, for many children, that sense of wonder gets squashed. We focus so much on everything else in the classroom. And as an educator, I know how busy everyone is. I know, trust me. And if I was there in person, I'm sure everyone would be shaking their heads. We have a full plate because there's so much that we need to focus on. I get it. I really do. However, if we're not allowing our students to engage in inquiry, asking questions, wonder, and so forth, then we begin to dim their sense of wonder. And after many years of not being able to engage in this process, you can see that the light begins to dim. Okay, so what is it then? What is it that our Haitian students know? Okay? Because again, they bring in a lot of strengths. We do not want to stop their sense of wonder because of the fact that they don't speak English, because they're coming in with a lot. They're coming in with lots of different experiences. They're coming in with their ability to use language, which I will show you at the end throughout this presentation. And we need to capitalize on this strength, and we need to celebrate it. So what is it that they're coming in with? They're coming in with, these are some of the courses that the students are required to take in Haiti. So they learn French, classical plays, some English, some Spanish, some Creole, Latin, and so forth. So these are some of the courses. So once they come in, even if you do not have access to their transcript, because some, depending on what school they went to, may or may not have their transcripts available when they first come to the United States, but you certainly ask them, what are the courses that you took in Haiti? Okay? Because we want to build on their strengths. Okay? What is it that Haitian students know? Haitian students know about plants, bones, animals, algebra. Those are some of the questions that I ask, and those are some of the questions that they ask, especially around plants, because most of the schools have a curriculum around agriculture. So the students are coming in with lots and lots of knowledge of of plants. They can look at a plant and tell you exactly what that plant for medicinal purposes, what it can do. And I've heard very young children, 4th, 5th graders, they'll look at a plant and I ask them, what is this? Oh, Dr. Edwidge, si vous avez un mal tête, ou ka pran, fè un ti thé, la bon pour. And I'm looking at them in wonder, because what they're saying is that if you just take this and you boil it and you make some tea, your headache will go away. Trust me, your headache, because this plant is really good for that. And it's just amazing to hear them and to hear them be able to describe the different types of plants. But they're able to do that. Okay, so that's something that they're part of their funds of knowledge. And how do we capitalize on that? Okay, so as a result of their of what it is that they absolutely can do, especially in schools and especially around language, they can recite information learned with no difficulties. Now, I understand Bloom's taxonomy, and I understand that recall is at the lowest level of the taxonomy. And yes, and it's very important for all students to be able to analyze, evaluate, and Haitian students are able to do that as well. But something that I find that they feel very strongly about the fact that they're able to recite information. But because of the fact that we have labeled it as the lowest part of the taxonomy, we don't capitalize on that ability. And that is if to remember large volumes of information, that is quite an achievement. We don't want to say we don't need the other parts of the taxonomy, but we can also value this because this is a way for them to use language. This is part of their linguistic repertoire, if you will, to be able to be able to recite a large volumes of information. So if you have a poem in your classroom, for example, if you have there's poetry, why not have Haitian students recite the poetry, because they will be able to do it, because again, they're accustomed to memorizing information and reciting. So they would be more than happy to be able to do that. All right, and it could be in Haitian Creole or in English, whichever they feel most comfortable with. Right? But again, this is something that we need to capitalize on. I recall many years ago when I asked my brother, who had many friends, many friends who all became medical doctors, all of them. And I asked, why? How did you guys do that? All of your friends, and they came to the United States around high school. So they did most of their education in Haiti and all became medical doctors. And he said, well, for us, medicine is for studying in medical school. It was pretty easy because you had to memorize a lot of information, large volumes of information. And we were able to do that because in Haiti, we're so used to doing that we were able to do that. So they transferred that into learning about for medicine, and now they're all very successful doctors. So again, we have to capitalize on what students bring in. And they also develop rigorous study skills because it took time for them to try to memorize all of that information. So they developed rigorous study skills as well. Okay. So the other part that I would like to also talk about briefly in terms of what Haitian students bring and their linguistic repertoire is the environmental print. So Espinosa and Asensi Moreno, this is a quote from them also. How do we take the environment into consideration? So what languages are featured in newspapers, restaurant signs, radio stations, and so forth? Because those are experiences, rich linguistic experiences that students are also bringing in their linguistic environment at home. What is it like? Well, for many Haitian students, you will find, and the next few slides I will share with you, but definitely newspapers. What are the literacy, evidence of literacy in their homes? Because how are the homes enriched with a rich linguistic environment? What happens at home? Are stories still being told in Haitian households? Well, let's go back to the newspapers. In many Haitian households, and I recall my household growing up, there were always at least 2, 3 Haitian newspapers. And some of the newspapers, articles were written in English, Haitian Creole, and French. Many of them, it was mostly French. And then over the years, you saw more and more Haitian Creole in that. So right there, Haitian students are exposed to 3 different languages. And the discussions that occurred in the home, especially around newspapers, the discussions for a lot of Haitian homes, it's politics. Haitian students are immersed in political discussions because of their parents. And they're hearing the political discussions all of the time. But those types of discussions oftentimes are not done in classrooms. They're not done in school, but this is another richness, if you will, of their language, that they can absolutely discuss politics at pretty much any level, but that's never tested. But that's part of their linguistic environment that these authors refer to. Okay, so did you know that some Haitian students are exposed to environmental print in 3 different languages in Haiti? Okay, now again, we know that Haitian Creole again is our native language, and I can't say that enough. That is and for me, that is the language that absolutely all that makes me smile when I read it. It's so rich in culture. It's just a wonderful, wonderful language. That said, you have some students who are also exposed to French. Even in Haiti, the environment has changed, where now you're beginning to see more signage in the different languages, right? So here we have, this is an example of a sign in English in Haiti. Okay. This is French. So this sign is in French, Le monde est à vous, you know? So even if, again, our native language is English, I'm sorry, our native language is Haitian Creole. Our native language is Haitian Creole. However, we still have signage in different languages. So even if you will find that some Haitian students are not proficient in French, they have some basic they have basic foundation in French, but it's still a resource. It's still a resource. How do we capitalize on that? As a Haitian community, do we capitalize on their knowledge of French as well? What is it that, how much of French did they actually acquire? Perhaps not total comprehension, but what about phonemic awareness? Okay, what is that what they have acquired? Is that part of their linguistic repertoire at home? How is French was ever used at home? Or did the parents ever speak French? I know that many Haitian households had different ways of using French, where some households that children, this was a very long time ago, were not allowed to speak Haitian Creole. They were only allowed to speak French to their parents, but they could speak Haitian Creole with their friends, but they could. So very different dynamic in every Haitian household. So we need to find out from the students who are coming in, yes, they speak Haitian Creole, but to what extent, what is the level of French? Are we even testing that? Simply because we know that any language that we have, even if it's at simply a functional level, it still serves as part of their linguistic repertoire that maybe that we can still tap in. Okay, and then we have Creole. Now we also have signage in Haitian Creole, which initially we did not have, but now, as I just mentioned, we do have signage in Haitian Creole. So you see this sign. So now children are exposed to seeing those signs in Haitian Creole. And this is not throughout Haiti, but this is part of the research that I believe needs to be done even now for us to see what are the linguistic messages that Haitian students are getting, because that's what they're bringing to the classroom as well. Then here you have a legitimacy of the Haitian Creole language as you have signs all over. Okay. Here's another sign. Ensemble, nous travaillons pour un pays tous les mains. Right? So together we're going to work for a country that is well lit. So that's that sign. So you have in the environment 3 different languages that the students are pulling from. Their native language, absolutely. Then you have other languages, but do we tap that? Do we see that as a linguistic strength? And this is why I really and truly wanted to present on this issue, because it's through tapping into our students' linguistic strength, we can help them to engage in process of inquiry. We can allow them to select any of their languages that they speak in which to engage in that process. Incredibly important. Okay. So this is important. Pause. I'm going to hold on. I'm just okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. A little technical difficulty there for a second. All right, but definitely welcome back. So I was referring to the language of the environment, where the authors, another quote for you, refer to it as language ecology. And I thought that this was incredibly important to share with you, to take into consideration your students' language ecology. And they define it as such. They said, in our case, we refer to language ecology as the relationship between a person's language practices and the language environment that surrounds the child. What is the language environment that surrounds Haitian students? Again, as educators, if we don't take the time out to have this type of investigation, if you will, then again, we will not be able to capitalize on what they bring in. Or is their language and ecology, is their language environment such that they have many different books written in many different languages, as I mentioned, in newspapers, or is it simply they have a Bible, all right? And they have only a Bible is the only form of evidence of literacy found in their homes. Do we know that? Okay. Again, very important to know about the language environment. So the authors say that language ecology refers to how language practices are present in both the physical and the lived environment for the speaker to thrive in. So in other words, once you find out about their language environment, then you're able to help them make that connection between their environment and the environment of the classroom. Okay? Incredibly important for their language ecology. So just to touch now on the Haitian Creole language itself. And as I mentioned about what is it that we know about what children bring in with their rich language repertoire. So part of it is the Haitian Creole language. So what is the strength? What is it about Haitian Creole? And I'm not going to, this is Dr. Degas has provided some examples here. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but just a couple of bullets. So this one, as well as this bullet, where the word makone is highlighted. So, and I smile when I say these words because of the vivid imagery it puts in my mind. And Haitian Creole is a very visual, it's filled with imagery. So when you speak it, you actually see it, which is what makes it so exciting and so beautiful. So here it says, selon ma loi pays Haïti, c'est langue créole là qui makone toute population ensemble comme nation. So what they're basically saying is, what he's saying here is that it's the Creole language that brings everybody together in one nation. But saying it like that doesn't really do it justice, because the word makone, it's intertwined, but it's even more than that. It evokes this emotion of unity just by using the word makone. It's really bringing all of it together. It's so exciting. The other one that I wanted to share with you is parce que me de créola, parce que me de créola coule clair tant que de l'eau couée. Oh my goodness. This is why I have this in the back here. My background there. Couleur clair tant que de l'eau couée. Meaning, so it says that with Creole, parce que me de Creole, because I help Creole, that couleur clair, meaning that it becomes clear. It just like the water of a coconut. Okay, so it's but the comparison is with the water, as I said, the liquid inside the coconut, and it's just like it becomes clear, just like the color, just like the water of the coconut. And again, this image of Creole and the way that it drips or flows just like coconut water, you see. And again, it's just so beautiful. Another example that I will share with you, just this one. Then the statement here is deux femmes vaillantes à quatre garçons canson. Now, deux femmes vaillantes. For now, I'll just sit here on the femme vaillant, which means two powerful women and four powerful men as well. But when it's spoken in Haitian Creole, deux femmes vaillantes, when you're spoken to deux femmes vaillantes, then it talks about the power of these women, not just powerful. It goes beyond powerful. Do you see? It's beyond powerful. So when a woman is described as being femme vaillante, it's powerful, it's strong, it's determined, there's just so much involved just in these words. Do you see? Okay, here, the last example that I'd like to share with you is that as he describes, répéter texte en français, ça, en français, c'est sans comprendre tant que Jacques répète. So sometimes it was referring to that whenever your words are or repeating text written in French is just like a parrot. And this is why I have the picture of the parrot there. It's just like repeating from a parrot because there's no comprehension there. So again, you have this imagery and this to help the speaker, the listener, to clearly understand what it is that you're saying. So a lot, and again, a lot of imagery. Okay, so what I'm trying thus far that I've been trying to share with you is the fact that we say that language learning is really, and language itself is dynamic, and it's dynamic because we are. The dynamic means that it changes all the time. It's dynamic because we change. The language of 2020, because of a pandemic and racial tension in the United States, has changed the lexicon. As we know, many new words have been added because of that year that we had. And it doesn't have to be in a year like 2020 all the time, but as human beings, we change. So because of that, we say that language is dynamic simply because we change. So why isn't language learning not more dynamic? Why is it static? So the authors say, rather than moving from one point to the next in a straight line, students' language learning should be interactive, integrated, and dynamic. And dynamic in the classroom. I always had a noisy classroom. The principal always told me, shut the door, please, because I was disturbing everyone else and I didn't mean to, but I knew that my classroom had to be a classroom where students were always engaging in in discussions and talking to one another. Incredibly important, because again, language learning should be dynamic. Okay? So for the linguistic and cultural challenges and that for many students face is that the linguistic environment is not as meaningful as it should be, that the students are not being engaged in meaningful interactions. So it's not dynamic. For some Haitian students, the perception of Haitian Creole was now it's beginning to look at as for in Haitian Creole that it can be used for intellectual development. Initially, it wasn't used that way. So in the schools, you didn't have this meaningful interaction in the schools or using Haitian Creole because it was not perceived as a language that can be used for intellectual development. Now we have parents absolutely saying, we want Haitian Creole in the classroom. In Piton, I did a study asking the parents, did they want Haitian Creole? Oh, the parents couldn't wait. In the schools, the students couldn't wait because they said, that's the language we understand. Thank you so much. Okay, we're beginning to see that Haitian Creole can be used for intellectual development if we allow for it to happen in the classroom. Haitian Creole, we find, has entered the domains of religion, government, and also academia, as I just mentioned. Okay, so Professor Garcia and Wei, what I have been speaking about really has to do with translanguaging. And many of you have heard this term being used. And there's a reason for that because it is transformative, as I mentioned earlier. So it's translanguaging is used as a socio-educational process that enables students to construct and constantly modify their social, cultural identities and values as they respond to their historical and present conditions critically and creatively. Okay? But they can only do that if they're allowed to use the language that allows for them to be able to think critically. Do you see? And when they're able to do that, they begin to really think about their sociocultural identities and their own values, which then becomes transformative. Okay? For example, I will give you this very quick example of another program that I had in Haiti many years ago, where I taught the students English. These were high school students who wanted to learn English. And also research. I wanted to teach them how to use the computer to engage in research activities. So we did just that. And I taught them 2 hours per week on Saturdays via Zoom, even before Zoom became a thing. So one of the things that I decided to do is that I would give them different prompts, as you see here, but I wrote the prompts in English as well as in Haitian Creole to allow for them to select the language that they wanted to use. And in the beginning, I asked whether or not it should be did they want French included? I wanted for them to tap into their linguistic repertoire. So they decided that they wanted English and Haitian Creole. So all the questions that I asked were all about in English and in Haitian Creole. And it was very interesting. This is an example of what we're talking about, and students being able to, because once they're able to use their native language, they begin to analyze their situation. And for those of you who can read Haitian Creole, I'll let you read this I'll let you, you can certainly read it. But in general, this student was in Haitian Creole, and as he did more research into his situation and so forth, and we had these rich discussions, that he was questioning the government's role in education. What has the government really done for us? And so forth. And he was actually questioning his situation. And he after he wrote this, and we were still talking about it, he also mentioned to me, and he said he added to what in our discussion groups, he said, Dr. Edwidge, why is it that you're sitting all the way in the United States and you have developed this program for us? Should it have not been the government's responsibility to do these types of programs for us? Why is the government not doing what the government is supposed to be doing? So he's in college now, but allowing for him to use his native language to, as we just saw, especially translanguaging, it allows for him to begin to really think critically about his socioeconomic, sociopolitical environment. It was a powerful discussion. Another thing that I wanted to share very quickly with you also is that here we have two texts, and I'm not going to read them, but we have two texts. And this student wanted to write about, and she decided to write in English. Yes, so she has not yet acquired all of the skills yet in terms of vocabulary and sentence structure in English, but this is the language that she chose to write in, and that was absolutely okay with me. So she wrote it, but also because of the fact that we created such a warm environment that the student decided that and a welcoming one and a supportive one, that after she wrote her response in English, then one of the other students decided that she would help her with her English and just said, but she started out by saying, Woody, this is very good English. So already these are high school students. So she knows that she's going to start off with a positive statement to build her up, as opposed to tearing her down because she didn't want to do that. She said, Winnie, this is very good English. I'm happy that you're able to express your feelings fluently using English. I have just a few small grammar corrections for you. All right. So this is the student. This is not me doing this. This is one of the other students who's definitely more advanced in English. But we created such a safe classroom that those who are more advanced, they felt, especially with her, she felt a responsibility to say, oh, this is really good, but this is how it can be better. And you can see the students writing in English, definitely at a higher level. But again, I've allowed the students to really, there was a safe space for language and language development that they could interact with each other and help each other. And again, these are students in Haiti writing English as this way. Okay, so we know that the program, as I just mentioned to you, anything that you're doing must be meaningful to the participants, must be meaningful to the students. And this is how you can have a biliteracy approach to using Haitian Creole and English. And then if they speak French and they can't do French, it's okay to incorporate their French as well. But when using a biliteracy approach, it is important to understand how a culture uses print, as I mentioned to you, how it is perceived by a culture and how it is being used within that society. All of those things must be taken into consideration. And we also have now, especially in our program, in my next workshop, I do speak a lot about the proverbs and how the students are actually using them, because that is another rich linguistic practice that Haitian students have, and they can talk about proverbs, and it is just amazing. But one of the ones that we have adopted is what is known as, we talk about Creole parler, Creole comprendre. And this is really interesting because we have people are now embracing it and embracing it in so many different ways. Lots of discussions just around this, to the point that in all of our books that we're currently using in the school in Haiti, on the cover, we have Creole parler, Creole comprendre. And if I was with you in person, I would say Creole parler, and I'm sure you would have responded by saying Creole comprendre. So basically we're saying that because we speak Creole, and that's our native language, it's understood. So, but again, there's so many ways. The children use it in so many empowering ways. So if somebody says something, And then it's saying to say I'm in agreement with you. Then the person who has said whatever it is that this person is saying, after that can say Creole parler, meaning do you understand what it is that I'm actually saying? And then the other person can respond by saying Creole comprendre, meaning that yeah, I hear you, you know. But again, it's uniting. Now in Piton, people just walking, they'll see each other and they'll say Creole parler, and the other one will say Creole comprendre, you know, and then it serves as a uniting factor. Now, this is how powerful this has become, right? And then lastly, we have you see my some of our, I call them all my children. The translanguaging, as I just mentioned, it allows students to capitalize on their linguistic repertoire without rigid language boundaries, meaning that even in our dual language programs, and we have Haitian Creole in the morning and English in the afternoon, that's fine because of the fact that we're going to be teaching certain aspects with the language and so forth, but it shouldn't be so rigid that if you are learning English and you are in your English time, that you can't include Haitian Creole in your discussions because it's English time. And this is what we do too often. This is what we do. We set these rigid language boundaries that will not allow the students to just use the language that they need to at that moment. Okay, we need to let them use their language repertoire because we want to be able to, for them to feel powerful, to be able to use whichever language when they're able to, when they want to use them, because they need to be able to express themselves. So our goal, especially for dual language programs or our programs, is to unleash the transformative power of our students by seeing and acknowledging their linguistic strengths, because they have a lot of strengths. Okay, so I'm going to end with a very short video of some of the Haitian children singing in 3 languages. It's very short, but it's definitely worth seeing. So I'm going to share that with you, and I will end my presentation with that. And again, it's just to celebrate the linguistic strengths of our students. Then these are my references and everything that has been referenced today. And
between history and language.
I'm going to stop. But this was added, but I'm not going to have enough time to show you the connection between history and language. But I do want to very quickly, though,
I'd like to
that please be sure, and I'm sorry for the double, but please be sure to include all aspects of history in there is a tie between language and history. So I just wanted to, for you,
as I mentioned,
there's also the American Revolution, which Haitians played a significant role in that. You saw the other slide that was Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, who founded the city of Chicago. And now there's under Mayor Lightfoot. She just received funding to expand a huge park that's going to give tribute to Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable. So very exciting things that all Haitians should be aware of. And one last one, and I have to, with the Battle of that they also participated in
Haiti.
And you have the statues, the monuments in Savannah of the Chasseurs Volontaires, right in Savannah. If you haven't had a chance to visit it, you absolutely should, because again, you want to show your students, especially your Haitian students, that you are interested in all of their rich linguistic history, not just linguistic history, but just Haitian history, and how you can bring that into the classroom. All right, I will stop here and share with you my students who are right now All right, and I end, as I said, with their voices, and I apologize because the tape is on this side. I tried to change it, but it wouldn't. I couldn't get it to be right side up. So bear with me, but listen to their voices. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute so that I can include the sound. Okay, the sound was there. Okay, so here are their voices. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope this was helpful. The goal is to be sure that we are making the Haitian students in our classrooms visible, where that we are allowing for them to demonstrate all of their inner strength, and we are also capitalizing on their linguistic strengths that they're coming in with. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.